Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're looking at a Turkey in turmoil, the latest incident that we've seen a lot of different developments over the past couple of months, but the latest one was the death of a 15-year-old boy who'd been in a coma since last June's Gezi Park protests. It sparked mass rallies in several cities of Turkey on Wednesday. In part one of our discussion, you heard the fiery response by the Prime Minister himself, the Prime Minister who was on the campaign trail. We're ahead of local elections in Turkey on March the 30th. Could the decade-long power of the AKP of Recep Tayyip Erdoğan be loosening? We're talking about it with, from Ankara, Galip, DALAY, political researcher with the public policy group SETA. Joining us from Istanbul, Sinan ULGEN, chair of the Center for Economics and Foreign Policy Study. And here in the studio, Yetkin YILMAZ, activist with the Taksim Collective in Paris. Also with us, Emre DEMIR, editor-in-chief of Zaman France, and Dilek YANKAYA, who lectures at the French Political Science Institute, Sciences Po, the author of The New Bourgeoisie, the Turkish Model. Thank you all for being back with us. Just before the break, we heard Galip DALAY talking about the power struggle that's going on between Islamists right now. Recep Tayyip Erdoğan versus Pennsylvania-based cleric Fethullah Gulen. Fethullah Gulen with close ties to the newspaper that you represent. And that clouds the issue, doesn't it? Over how much of this is really a graft investigation and how much of this is a power play.
Well, first of all, I think Mr. DALAY got me wrong. I didn't say that Erdogan has lost his electoral base, his electoral support, but I said that he lost his moral legitimacy. That means in any society, in Europe or in the United States, a prime minister who commits and admits that he committed constitutional violations. He admitted that he interfered with the justice, he interfered with the media, should have resigned in any country. So I think Erdogan not only continues to reign in the country, but he blames the others, not only the Gülen movement, not only Fethullah Gülen, or not only the Zaman, Gülenist newspapers, etc. But I think that he is the principal and the lead actor of his own demise. He is the worst enemy of himself, and I think his polarizing discourse, his way of handling things, and the way of playing the game in a very dangerous manner, is the principal actor of his own demise. I don't say that people don't vote for him. He is still the most popular leader in Turkey, but is losing now his popularity, and it will continue, I think. But regarding to moral legitimacy, even if you are in the power with the 50% of votes, if you committed some crimes, if you have some serious allegations of corruptions against you,
you should be stepping down. Sinan ULGEN, let me ask you, we heard in part one of our discussion the reactions, very strong and defiant by the Prime Minister to this death of that teenage boy, and the more conciliatory, expressing sorrow on the part of the President. Is it a new rift that's opening up within the high halls of power, or is this just a case of good cop, bad cop on the part of those who rule Turkey?
No, this is something that we have witnessed as well in the past few months, and even more than a year, really, with President Gül adopting a more liberal, a more embracing, a more inclusive style of rhetoric. He spoke greatly about the Turkey-EU relationship, about the need for further reforms, for enhancing human rights and democratic standards. Whereas Prime Minister Erdogan continued in his more polarizing rhetoric, which arguably served him well to consolidate his power base. But nonetheless is driving now the country towards a much more heightened state of dispute and acrimony which tends to undermine the country's ability to function domestically. It impacts its economy and it impacts its foreign policy.
So, in other words, you're saying that it's really a measured difference between Erdogan and the president.
It is. It is. I think both of them are genuine. Both of them reflect what they feel. But Gül's position, his narrative, has been welcomed by a larger share of the Turkish population. We have also seen this over the last summer during the Gezi protests, where when the whole reaction started, Gül tried to appease that by telling the people that he understood what this was about and that the necessary measures would be taken. There were even people within Erdogan's government, like the Deputy Prime Minister Arınç, who also spoke along similar terms, similar lines. But again, when Prime Minister Erdogan came back to the country, he was on a visit to Northern Africa at the time, he decided to adopt a more polarizing attitude. So in Gezi as well last year, we have seen this difference, and this difference continues to this day.
Yeah, let me ask you about this, Yetkin Yilmaz, because the president has signed into law this internet censorship bill. In fact, I read in the Turkish press this morning that they're soon going to be able to archive all public tweets. So is there much of a difference between Gül and Erdogan?
Actually, I would like to clarify on the polarization issue because, in physics, polarization means two poles. But here, in the polarization in Turkey, but actually the polarization in Turkey is not about two poles. The tension between the Fethullah Gülen and the government has been brought up, but there's actually much larger scale polarization of different types of people, all of which is being fed by the government. And in fact, the large group, the large part of the protests are not against only Erdogan, but also the whole political structure and the Cemaat of the Fethullah Gülen who brought Erdogan to power and then changed their mind. We are, in fact, trying to reach the actual democracy. You asked about our confidence in the ballot, about whether we believe in the democracy in the ballot or not. The Prime Minister repeats this a lot of times. He associates the words democracy and ballot together, but democracy is not about the ballot only. Democracy is about the freedom of speech and the freedom for activism and the freedom to be in non-government organizations. So when there is police violence, you cannot speak of democracy, even if you have elections, if you have the ballot. And if you have to really consider the polarization in Turkey carefully, because a large group, a large fraction of the population who has certain anger for the current situation have not forgotten that one of the, for example, massacres of the current government, one of the biggest massacres in 2011, when 34 Kurdish people were killed by the government. For example, unfortunately, the newspaper that the gentleman here is working on, unfortunately, didn't report that, and we were really upset about this. And now they have changed sides, but that doesn't mean that the problem has been solved. The problem is that the media is right now in total control of either of these several powers, and it's easily manipulated, and it can all fed this complicated polarization structure of Turkey. So what we are actually trying to fight against is not a government, it's not a specific organization. What we are trying to fight against is the polarization itself and is the violence itself. So we don't want the gas canisters, but we want words and sentences to to actually debate our politics. So we want our freedom for activism, we want our freedom for protests, and we want a media, we want the social media, the internet, for the exchange of information. And without that, you cannot talk about democracy. And without that, you cannot talk about science. Because as a physicist from CERN, I am concerned that at the moment you block information, you block the transmit of information, there is no longer science possible. And without science, what is the direction are we trying to go in terms of humanity?
All right, over 14 million people in a 48-hour span tweeting the name of Berkin Elvan. This again in the context of that new bill that we talked about on internet censorship. The Prime Minister recently vowing to crack down on social networks.
Myself and some of my friends, not all of them, we're determined on this subject. We will not leave this nation at the mercy of YouTube and Facebook.
Galip, DALAY, how far will Erdogan go on this?
Well, again, like right now we're talking about discourse and action. Yesterday, I mean, a couple of days ago, he talked about like, even possibly taking some measure against, Facebook and YouTube. But yesterday, he had also like, another interview. He totally said like, we do not have any such idea at all. So right now, like, it's, it will be more reasonable if we talk about like, policy-wise, what has been implemented and what has been affected. I know that some of the policy that has recently been introduced do have some problematic aspect, and it has been hotly debated within the Turkish politics and within the Turkish, in Turkish media as well. And because of that, some correction and some amendment has been made to the proposal that has been made. It is still a continuing process, like for many other policies. But in the end, if this government and if any other government in Turkey is reliant on the support of the people in order to continue their term, they cannot do anything against the wishes of the people. And knowing that Turkey is well connected with the world, its economy is dependent on the global economy. It's like, a candidate for the European Union. It's, it's dependent on foreign direct investment. It structurally cannot go down this road. If any government pursue this road, it will be voted out, whether a day earlier or later. So in this regard, I suggest that we focus on the actions rather than the words.
Rather than the words. Dilek, YANKAYA, Turkey is the country that jails the most journalists in the world. Mm-hmm. Nonetheless, do you agree that what we're seeing here is saber rattling and that we should pay attention to deeds, not words?
Actually, I would like to remind that our colleagues in Turkey in universities feel a great pressure of their university administration. So I agree with my colleague that the research has become really difficult in Turkey today. So we see a lot of pressure and a lot of pursuits on our colleagues in Marmara University as well as other universities. So we can't say that we live in a freedom of research and expression in Turkey. I would like to highlight a fact which is interesting to my eyes. It's the fact that since 2002, we are living under the Islamic bourgeoisie's government. Okay, it's the Islamic bourgeoisie's power who came to power into being with this AKP party, and actually, I was waiting for a kind of a clash within this bourgeoisie, because if you stay in power during that much years, actually that long, necessarily there are conflicts of interest and opinions that emerge. And I think that we are living a struggle for power at the elite level at the time since 2010 and 2011, and I don't think that this power struggle between Fethullah Gülen and AKP, but especially Tayyip Erdogan, this power struggle has no counterpart at the social level, actually, because the followers of the Fethullah Gülen movement and the voters of the AKP were the same people, actually. So there was a great alliance between this faith-based network movement and the mobilization for AKP party and its government. So we are living a power struggle to monopolize the state mechanisms, the state resources, and this has no counterpart at the sociological level. So this is why actually we see only a manifestation from this, let's say, more secular and more urban populations, but we don't see yet the reactions of this conservative, of these people with more Islamic sensibilities, actually, because they don't know how to deal with this.
All right, we have a comment from one viewer is taking a dim view to it all. He says, "I get a sense your guests are talking more about rhetoric than reality and politics on the ground in Turkey." Well, let's talk about politics on the ground. And again, we mentioned earlier, first of all, there's the issue of the growth that Turkey's known for the past decade. We illustrated by last October's inauguration of the first rail tunnel under the Bosphorus, linking Europe to Asia. Those grand public work projects, though, underwhelming. The editorial board of the Christian Science Monitor, which put out an editorial saying that Erdogan has poured billions into impressive tunnels and trains, but President Gül, whose position is largely symbolic, has pointedly said democracy is not just winning elections. Are we being a little too quick, Sinan ULGEN, to dismiss the achievements of the past decade?
Nobody is actually dismissing the achievements of the past decade. I think that's also a part of Erdogan's resilience. When we look at growth, but in particular when we look at the different social policies that this government has successfully launched and implemented, it is certainly part of the success story. But Turkey is not China. Turkish people will not be happy just with growth. There is an inherent demand for more democracy. There is a domestic demand for the rule of law. And that is the current issue. It's not that people are unhappy with what the government provided in the past decade. Just that the people believe that the current standards of democracy, of rule of law, of the lack of, a lack of willingness to fight or to bring transparency to the allegations of corruption should change. All
right, and just to tell you as well, it's worrying markets. 10-year bonds have soared to a 4-year high in Turkey, 11.24%, highest in Bloomberg's emerging markets index. This, as the Istanbul Stock Exchange plummets, it has dropped 38% since the Gezi Park protests last June. And this week, the European Parliament also worried about what's going on. They discussed Turkey, which is still, as was mentioned by Galip, very much a candidate to join the EU. At the end of the session, though, the Enlargement Commissioner put out this tweet, Stefan Füle, saying, "Tonight's debate in the European Parliament showed that Turkey is losing its supporters. Reflection and follow-up in Ankara is needed to reverse this trend." Galip, your thoughts?
Do you think that Turkey's European process is very important and it's very much in the interest of both sides, and therefore, Turkey should make sure that it doesn't lose any friend in Europe? To the contrary, it has to gain, further friends in Europe, because the European project is one of the goals that unite the very large section of the Turkish society. And there is, some downsides that we have recently witnessed, but also there is some positive sides that after the 3 years that we have seen the opening of a new chapter. And in the report also they have suggested, European Parliament has suggested the opening of 2 more chapters, and the replacement of the previous Minister of European Affairs in Turkey with one more Europhile, one more committed to the European project, was a move in the right direction. So I know that it is obvious after the Gezi Park protests and after the December 17 events that Turkey does, things in Turkey does not move smoothly. But like, putting this in perspective, that, the new European minister is more Europhile, that we have seen more visits from Erdogan to Brussels after years. It is a move in the right direction. And I do expect right after local election to see a new activism on the part of the government vis-a-vis the European project.
Sinan, ULGEN, do you agree that at the end of the day, this is all going to draw Turkey closer to Europe?
Well, it depends how you define the end of the day. I think in the short term, Turkish domestic dynamics are not likely to help Turkey to move in the EU's direction. But I certainly hope that as a result of this polarization of these dynamics, there will come a time when Turkish people, the majority of them, will come to an understanding about the importance of the rule of law and democratic standards. And then the way to Europe will be accelerated.
All right, and one other point before we go, I want to bring this up with you, Emre, DEMIR. We could if you turn back the clock, remember to September 2011, Prime Minister Erdogan went on this tour of North Africa. He went to Egypt, he went to Libya, he went to Tunisia. Everywhere he went, he got a rock star welcome. Now he's at loggerheads with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt. Going forward, how big will the star power of Turkey be in the Arab world?
Well, actually, Turkey was a model regarding to his foreign policy with the zero problems until the Arab Spring, and then Erdogan actually overplayed his hand, and he thought that he has much more power than he thinks, and he failed miserably actually in regard to the Middle East.
So going forward, what is it going to say for? How is that going to change, for instance, his policy on Syria?
Well, maybe there are some signs that he wants to change his policy on Syria. They had talks with Iran, and there are some messages, but it would be difficult to change his policy on Syria because he was one of the most staunch leaders against the Assad regime. I think it would be difficult, and the leading actor of the foreign policy after Erdogan, sure, he was Ahmet Davutoğlu, the foreign ministers. The foreign affairs minister, and his thought, his way of handling things got Turkey here. So maybe a change of a minister can change the Turkish policy as well as we see. And just a little remark about Yetkin's remark about Zaman, the way Zaman covered the Roboski massacre 3 years ago was not accurate.
Okay, that said. Again, on this policy of where Turkey lies in its relation, on the one hand with Europe, on the other hand with the Arab world, with, of course, the conflict going on in Syria, and it being a NATO member with an eye now to what's going on in Crimea, will Turkey's star power ultimately be stronger or weaker?
I think that we should deal with this question at two levels, actually. There's a state level that is represented by Tayyip Erdoğan and his policies, and there is a society level. I think there are much more reciprocity at the social level, at the society's level, between Europe, between the Arab world and Turkey. And I think there are a lot of interactions in terms of this claiming for more democracy and more liberties. It's Europeanization in this sense, because it's claiming for larger social spaces and public spaces. But on the other hand, and unfortunately at the state level, it's difficult to see such an interaction actually. Either between Turkish states and the European states, as the European reaction shows it, or between the states in the Arab world and Turkey. So I think that the Erdogan state is getting more and more distance with both the European states and the Arab
on all fronts is what you're saying.
Yeah.
We're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately, but I want to thank you Dilek, Yankala. I want to thank Emre, DEMIR. I also want to thank Yetkin, YILMAZ for being with us. From Ankara, Galip, DALAY, and from Istanbul, Sinan, ULGEN. Thank you as well for joining us here in the France 24 debate.